lot of, basically every interaction we have is basically an opportunity to teach someone something. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys today, given what an impact you have on a daily basis and how important your role is in the creation of new scientific minds, to really bring them up into the space where they have exceptional and exciting careers ahead of them. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about for just a little bit of time today is a little bit what my career path looked like. It's a little bit non-traditional from a traditional science-based career, and kind of how I got into pharma and just a little bit of that story. So what I wanted to walk through first is just how I developed an interest in science. So I grew up on a horse farm and loved being outside. I still to this day think going up to North Georgia and playing in the woods is just the best place to be on the weekends. And I do that almost every weekend, to just be outside and exploring and asking questions. And one of the things that science provides us the opportunity to do, and biology in particular, is to answer a lot of these questions in an objective way. And that was something I found very appealing starting from a very young age. And I don't know, you guys on this call, I can't see everybody's faces, but we could probably all do a show of hands and say, I was the person where I started talking about something and everyone would be like, please don't share that with us. We don't need to know. You're giving us way too much information. Because we love to provide and teach other people about these concepts that we're so excited about, that have explained something really interesting about why the leaf is green or whatever it might be. So that was part of what really drove me to a scientific path later in life. And there was a few events when I was younger that that inspired me further. And part of it was the ability and the opportunity to physically interact with science and scientific concepts through dissections or titrations or what have you. And a lot of that didn't come until I started college. So for example, some of the experiments that you guys are doing in the classroom now for high school students is what I did in college. And so I'm really impressed at the level of scientific engagement that they have the opportunity to have in high school. And for me, my high school education in science was driven by, and that further exploration of biology was driven by my high school biology teacher, who basically pulled me aside and said, look, you've done really well at this. This is something that you're talented at. And to be honest, I would not have recognized that or potentially pursued this career if she had not done that. It really made an impact on me. Just someone recognizing that from the outside in and confirming that, it's not just about test scores, not just about all of the numbers we assign to these things, but rather the intellectual curiosity that we see from kids, even from young ages, to ask these questions and find answers. So all of this to say, this was the foundation that I worked from for the rest of my career. So next, the other thing I wanted to walk through is kind of after that, I went to Berry College up in North Georgia. Some of you guys may be familiar with Berry. So I was there for 4 years, biology major, chemistry minor. And I always look back and say, I wish that I'd probably switched those two, because I did really, and actually done biochemistry, because I really love that the biochemistry fusion of biology and chemistry is just such a great place to be. So when I finished college, I was not entirely certain what I wanted to do next. Took a year off, and then eventually decided to go back to school. And I did my PharmD and PhD at Mercer University here in Atlanta. So I am from Atlanta, basically born. I was born in Louisiana. We moved here when I was very young, grew up here, educated here, and I'm still here in Atlanta. So went to Mercer for PharmD and PhD, and then following that, actually, was asked to stay on faculty at Mercer and take a tenure track faculty position in the Department of Pharmaceutical Science. I ran a lab that did mathematical modeling of pharmacokinetic data from clinical studies from pharmaceutical products. So it went really well. I got grants and all kinds of stuff. I loved teaching. I really loved that aspect of it. It was all the other factors that I just didn't love. So I didn't love running a lab. So while I had a long research career at that point. I'd worked for a professor in college even for 3.5 years, spent 6 years doing my PhD, PharmD PhD, and then I had done a postdoc for a year. So I'd been embedded in the research environment, but had eventually determined this was just not where I wanted to spend my whole career. I loved communicating science. I loved talking about it. I loved telling other people about it. And so what I determined was that a switch to a different career path was needed. So I transitioned to the pharmaceutical industry, to Arbor, as Megan mentioned, and was there for about 3.5 years. Arbor is also an Atlanta-based company in the Perimeter Mall area. They have their offices currently. And then I was 3.5, 4 years there, and then made a transition to UCB, which is a global biopharmaceutical company with the US headquarters here in Atlanta and Smyrna, Georgia. Their company headquarters are based in Brussels. It's a large company, 7,500 or so worldwide employees, and I've been there for just over a year or so. So December of 2019, pre-COVID, as we define things these days, pre-COVID, I joined UCB. And so from that, what I'd like to talk a little bit about is how some of the things that, how essentially looking back to the things that I experienced in high school, the things I experienced in college from a research perspective, how that has provided me with the background to be successful in the career that I have now. Because the career that I have now, I don't touch anything to do with a lab. I haven't been in a lab since I left academia, and really I did computational work as a faculty member. So I haven't been in a hard science lab since 2011. So it's been 10 years since I've actually kind of touched a pipette. But all of the skills that I learned there and all of the knowledge base I developed is applicable today. So some of the information that and I'm not going to talk through all this, but just to give a little bit of a background on what I actually do now, I work in a department called Medical Affairs. Big picture, we do a couple different things. We manage relationships with clinicians and scientists. We provide education, we provide information. We do some grants. We make sure that educational events have funding that are relevant to our therapeutic area. The one that I specifically work in now is epilepsy. We do provide some funding for clinical studies as well. The thing we do not do is we do not sell or promote product. Our job is simply on the communication, dialogue, education, relationships management side of the equation. Which means that if you kind of take the step back and go, okay, well, if you're going to go out and talk to scientists, so these are the people, and even clinicians, these are the people hands-on with patients, hands-on with the actual scientific pieces of epilepsy. They're doing in vitro research. They're doing ex vivo research. They're working in these spaces. And if I can't go out and have an intelligent conversation about what that actually means, what that looks like, the challenges experienced there, it makes the conversation less relevant to them. So it really all of the education I had provided the foundation for where I am now, so that when someone says to me, pipetting, titrating, cell culture, all of those things are things that I have not experienced for years, but again, the building blocks for those conversations are there. Some other areas that I wanted to bring attention to, more specifically in medical, in the pharmaceutical company area. Most of the roles in medical affairs, again, they rely on a scientific background. And what I'm showing here is just some of some career paths for people who do have an interest in science, but may be the student who is in your classroom that maybe be very skilled at communicating the information, maybe doing it as well, but they may not have that drive to be in the lab all day long. There is definitely a career path down the road for them in science. It just may not look like what we traditionally picture. So communicating around science, the students who are really good at just communicating that information, it's key for success in these types of roles, and medical lead roles, medical communication roles, the medical science liaison role, and even drug safeties. They're all really key aspects. To talk through a little bit, very, very briefly, on what the people who fill these roles look like from an education standpoint. People in these roles are generally those that have gone through college and likely done additional education after that, whether that's a PhD, a PharmD, an MD, generally a doctoral level person. We do have some folks, or I have worked with some folks in the past that have been master's level candidates and have done very, very, very well. It's a little bit of a harder path down with that road though. But again, these are great for folks. These are career paths are great for folks that are engaged in science, really talented communicators, and really want to use their scientific backgrounds in a little bit of a different way. Additionally, there's some other roles in the pharmaceutical industry that may be interesting to these folks as well, that may require a little bit less education. So again, these are non-traditional. These are not the ones that would be hands-on with the actual experimentation. They're not in research and development, but rather training and marketing. Training is one where we need folks who can break down scientific concepts to our sales field teams and really break that down in an understandable way so that they can communicate it to allow them to be successful in their role. So training opportunities are great for these types of folks. Marketing. So marketing is an area that not a lot of folks think about, but you would not believe the number of people that I have spoken with in my career in pharma who are of a scientific background, meaning they went through college as a neuroscience major or a biology major, and they got to the end and said, wow, this was great. It's so fascinating. I don't think I can spend any more time in school. I'm just done with this. And so they pursued a career in marketing or training and have been very successful. But again, building on those foundations, these are people that can pick up a scientific paper but they understand what the methods mean. They understand what it looks like. They understand how they got to the results because they have that scientific basis. Additional roles potentially across pharma that are a little non-traditional, so away from the benchtop. Quality, we have folks that work in quality that have scientific backgrounds across the industry looking at product standards. So does the product meet quality standards so that we can get it marketed based on what we have sent to the FDA? Really critical roles for our industry, and definitely something that that could be a wonderful career opportunity. Regulatory, there is a variety of roles in regulatory. A good friend of mine works in a regulatory position where her undergraduate degree was in zoology, and her role is essentially looking at the way that materials presented in promotional materials from our side, and asking the question if it is correct, does it meet the standards that the FDA has put forth? So taking her background and using it with some additional knowledge that she's gained over the years around FDA regulations and things like that, but still just building on her scientific background. So some things that are really critical for people, so that are in these roles are listed on this slide. And the one thing I wanted to really underscore, I've mentioned communication several times. Communication is a really key aspect to positions in pharma. At the baseline of all of this is a baseline level of scientific and medical acumen and/or medical acumen. I have seen people come into roles in pharma that are from a purely scientific background and from a purely medical background. What I will say actually is that the folks from a purely scientific background generally have a little bit of a leg up on those with a purely medical background because they're equipped with the critical thinking skills that are necessary to be successful in the environment. So the skills that we teach, like the tactile skills that get people excited about science, to me, they also drive that critical thinking side of the equation for them to help them develop that and take it forward. And I think that really helps folks in our field to be very successful in the endeavors they have in the future. Oops, wrong way. And with that, I would just like to open it up to questions. I know I went through that fairly quickly, but wanted to give you guys a little bit of a background on some non-traditional ways and non-traditional career paths for some of the folks that you guys are working with in your classrooms, and also a perspective on how the skills and abilities and the materials and the resources that have been provided by the opportunities here at Georgia Biomed Institute, how those really do relate long term, because I still go back to the knowledge that I developed in these earlier points in my career and reference back to that as I'm trying to work on nuanced projects today. So it is a really important aspect. So would open it up to questions if there are any.